This area, there used to be concentration camps where our ancestors were kept and were forced to work as slave labor.
Over 100 years ago, German colonial forces in Namibia systematically killed tens of thousands of Herero and Nama people, leaving a legacy of trauma, dispossession, and poverty. In 2021, the German government acknowledged responsibility for the atrocities, but the process of formal reconciliation has been difficult.
They have always shied away from even mentioning the word genocide.
Descendants of the victims say they've been excluded from negotiations. People in Power was there in 2021. 4 years later, the fight for recognition and reparations continues.
You see on the background over here, that's the Namib Desert. The sand will come and bury everything. But for some reason, the sand, the dunes, refuse to bury these people because their spirits are strong and they want their story to be told. We are in the Swakopmund Cemetery. In my background is the people who died in the concentration camp.
In this desert and across Namibia, between 1904 and 1908, German colonial forces displaced and killed up to 80% of the Herero tribe, as many as 80,000 people. Other ethnic groups like the Nama and the San also suffered grievously at the hands of the colonizers. 10,000 Nama died, half their population, as well as an unknown number of San. This is widely considered as the first genocide of the 20th century. In many ways, Imperial Germany's treatment of the indigenous people of Namibia foreshadowed the barbarity of the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews and other groups during World War II.
The concentration camps were really, that's where almost a lot of our people perished from malnutrition, and a lot of them were forced to work on the railway, and they basically worked them to death.
Jefta Nguahirimo has spent most of his adult life fighting for international acknowledgement of the genocide and restitution for the descendants of the victims.
I joined this struggle based on the stories that I recall my grandmother told me, and then when I started, as an adult, I started learning more and learning more. And ever since, I have never rested.
In May of 2021, it seemed the hard work of people like Jefta had finally paid off.
Wir bezeichnen heute diese Ereignisse jetzt auch offiziell als das, was sie gewesen sind, ein Völkermord. Wir bekennen uns damit auch zu unserer historischen Verantwortung. Und im Lichte dieser historischen und auch moralischen Verantwortung Deutschlands werden wir Namibia und die Nachkommen der Opfer um Vergebung bitten.
A few months later, Namibia and Germany announced a draft agreement. Both sides said it would bring closure to a dark chapter of history. Germany would formally apologize to Namibia and pay 1.1 billion euros in compensation spread over 30 years. But for Jefta and many other Herero, the agreement was deeply problematic. When the bill was presented to the Namibian parliament in September 2021, protesters traveled from far and near to oppose it.
It's a peaceful march, but quite a very important march because it is raising a number of issues, rejecting the 1.1 billion quantum that the Germans wants to pay us, the very same amount of money that the Germans have already given to Namibians for the last 31 years. It's the same amount they want to pay us.
Jefter traveled from his home in the United States to campaign against the agreement. He visited Namibia's parliament, which was built using forced labor of Herero and Nama people.
This is a very painful moment for me, standing on this ground, and simply because this area, there used to be our concentration camps where our ancestors were kept and were forced to work as slave labor. My grandmother used to told me about the genocide.
It began in 1904, after the Herero and Nama rebelled against German colonizers who were aggressively seizing their land. In response, the head of the military administration of what was then German Southwest Africa, General Lothar von Trotter, issued an order to his troops to exterminate all Herero, men, women, and children. After defeating the Herero militarily, the Germans herded the survivors eastwards into the inhospitable Omahiki Desert, the intent to kill them through hunger and thirst.
The flight to the east and how our people perished, and the dispossession of their land, the dispossession of their cattle, and all those then they experienced in the concentration camps. My grandmother's mother were captured by the Germans and sent to Lutretz, Chak Island, in concentration camps. And from there they worked as slave labor. Some of them died, and the few who survived, basically that's why I'm here today.
His grandfather's mother didn't survive.
My great-grandmother was too old and tired to walk, and she was left behind. They left her under a tree to die. And that's actually the story that really sparked my interest, is like how she died, a death without dignity.
Almost every Herero person has a story like this to tell. This is why Jefter decided to document Herero opposition to the agreement. He traveled from the capital Windhoek to Okahanja to meet the acting chief of the Herero.
The Hereros were sent to these remote areas to serve as a labor pool for the white communities or white industrialists. The present and the past is hard to distinguish, in particular in these areas.
Vipiura Kapuo was the acting chief of the Ova Herero Traditional Authority, which represents most Herero in Namibia.
Aminguta yeye akura kuchairi nawa mshibeshe kucha agreement ando pakatiko ba kodoro benda mbali posia ete oshambutu ata mshitiro ya twatha kuliro rupa ro agreement ngama yi uja na hi pakatiko horomenda mbali ete ngunda kaitwe katwe yakura tundingira kucha katuliro rupa modo agreement anda oshabandu puta yamwa.
We put this to Ruprecht Spolenz, Germany's chief negotiator. He said that under international law, such negotiations can only take place between states, not individual groups.
There are many groups who say, unfortunately, we were not part of the negotiations. And if I would start to count these groups, I come easily about 10, 15, 20 groups who are complaining not to have been included.
But Kapuo remained unconvinced by Germany's explanation. The negotiations failed to secure direct compensation for the Herero, so the 1.1 billion euros which Germany plans to pay will be administered by the Namibian government.
Namibia ihe osisi hungirwa yoshi suta kwete maraka kachunga benena kachira kunga manaite na ogusha ete matuanga ombate ronji ihunga menaite pye kungula na byo binambi no usiona naite And the name of Tukamunjira Yokrevera, the Munumakatuna Hospital, Sitamuno was over and Duave to Babe, and then what man from Yoko Kahanja.
The once prosperous Herero, having lost their land and their much-prized cattle after the genocide, now live, for the most part, in poverty. Just like everyone else here, Benoni Kauri is struggling to survive.
Shuno viungura na katiti ufula kusha ya tunduna mwendo ere po vanashino maifula na usha koskole ni vatu ere rukwa ouze ukuhena viungura urishi nene bifula na viuri mehe shimna shipeheno shina virinjika pena shina vanashi maiso kenda koskole po maiso kuria skole apiti himuna nika pena shina katiata kakapena ye tupe imariwa uri vitu ta teneka tuna shina mwenyeru kwano eno mutu ito mwetu po mariwa mbo utitima mutu pembo mutu kangombo keme maturanda uvari utatu nanga ndo shunda shikwata sana shiri oshunda abiko murungu ukuja ninikizengo kutupambye shimariwa uri shiri.
Without some kind of intervention, her children are unlikely to escape the cycle of poverty. And making life even harder, the government had recently decreed that they must move to an even more remote location.
Mbanjira shwa kakango no skole kwiri munungu makavada mungapi mopendura pongapi akavada pongapi shwa pendura pondano odo iri nduma kaonjo do iri mbari makavada ko skole shimi mbanjo skole ya hiti.
That's too much. It's too emotional for me. The government has abandoned them.
And it's not just in the villages that poverty amongst the Herero is rife. It's the same in urban areas. Swakopmund is a coastal town popular with German tourists. But on the outskirts of the town, Herero people live in bleak, informal settlements. Lawrence Ndura moves from the countryside to the city in search of a better life.
He has been here for 9 years now at this place. And this is where he lives. No electricity, no running water. All the cattle died of drought. And so there's no work. So the best they can come is come here, try to forage some food from in the city.
Lawrence invites Jefta into his home.
Traditional things.
Are you selling those?
My girlfriend selling. Do it herself by hand. Yeah. This is a type of a genocide.
Lawrence tells us that to make ends meet, his girlfriend sells these dolls to German tourists.
Before the genocide. My great-grandfather was involved in the concentration camp. He was at the Lutheran concentration camp.
At the Lutheran concentration camp?
Yeah, between 1904 and 1908, genocide.
So what do you think about the Germans today?
Germans today, they have to pay for what they did to our grandparents, because that one is the wound that take long in our lifetime. Money is the only thing that can make changes. We can buy our land back, we can buy our animals, then we start with the farming process. Yeah, we're living like we feel that we are in a concentration camp, because the life that we are living here is not good to us.
These young people over here you see running in the streets over here, they will have nothing to lose but to demand their land back. And that's exactly what's going to happen. This situation is unacceptable, and it's unacceptable.
This sense of economic and political marginalization among the Herero has heightened their mistrust of SWAPO, the ruling party in Namibia since 1990. It's amplified the feeling that the government mishandled the genocide negotiations with Germany. We tried to put this to the Namibian government, but despite numerous requests, no government official granted us an interview. We did, however, manage to speak to Professor Fanuel Kapama, one of Namibia's chief negotiators. He himself is Herero.
My great-grandmother was a brother of Samuel Maharero, who led the Herero people during the war of colonial resistance.
Kapama told us the agreement was the best the Namibian government could achieve, given Germany's tough negotiating tactics.
They have always shied away from even mentioning the word genocide. But the bigger challenge was on the quantum, which has remained a very key issue to the point that it almost derailed. Then there is no reference to the word reparation.
The negotiations, in our view, have been for political and moral reasons. This was not a legal question. We avoided legal speech to avoid this kind of misunderstanding, and reparation is a legal term, and therefore we spoke about healing the wounds, which means, in a sense, probably the same, but not in a legal term.
But Kapama says the negotiations were less about healing wounds than they were about avoiding legal liability.
That was a very heavy debate. Later on, they came around and said that, okay, if we agree to pay reparation, then we will do away with development aid. And we said, no, those are two different things for the victim community.
And there's a good reason why Germany is keen to avoid any payments being labelled as reparations. Henning Melber, a Namibian academic, explains why.
There were war crimes during World War II committed in Italy, in Greece, in Poland, and in other Eastern European societies, where local courts there ruled that the German government should pay reparations to the descendants.
Germany has refused to accept liability for such claims. Melber says if reparations were paid to Namibia, that might set a legal precedent.
Then these rulings would be seen in another light, and then it would become really expensive for Germany.
So, with direct reparations seemingly off the table, what about the Herero demand that they should get their land, or at least some of it, returned to them? Any discussion about the return of land must involve its current owners, mostly white Namibian farmers who possess vast tracts of it. Gerd Volbling is a German Namibian who speaks fluent Herero. He owns a 15,000-hectare farm in the Waterberg, the region which used to be inhabited by the Herero until the Germans began their campaign of annihilation against them in 1904.
My great-great-grandfather came here in 1907, which was just after the German Herero War, and farming here and living in close relationship with the Herero communities bordering to our fence, and it's very much farming related, but of course it brings together our different cultures as well.
But when it comes to addressing the past, Volbling, like other white German Namibian farmers in the region, deny that this land used to belong to the Herero.
This land was 100 years before that, it was not inhabited by Herero-speaking people, to the knowledge I do have.
While touring the farm, Jefter raises the land issue.
I don't think just buying land and giving it back will improve the situation dramatically. I doubt that one. I think we have to develop the area, we have to develop the people, investing in a better tomorrow, like education and infrastructure, schools and hospitals, that people really feel that their life is improving.
Jefter wants to know if they can reach a common understanding about the past.
Do you deny that there was a genocide, or you don't deny it?
I don't question the harm which was done to our Herero people. Yeah? They lost many of their land, they lost almost all their cattle, and they lost let's say half of the population.
Yet Volbling doesn't believe the mass murder of Herero was sanctioned by the government of the time.
If there would have been the initial thought of eradicating a certain tribe, but there was not an intention, and the relationship to the Holocaust is for me, it is far-fetched.
But Jefta's next visit illustrates that for many Herero, historical links between the genocide and the Holocaust aren't far-fetched at all. He travels to Shark Island, which was once a notorious concentration camp. Herero and Nama, who survived death in the desert, were brought here and used as slave labor.
This side is where our ancestors were kept, and the Germans set up this concentration camp, and they used to call, historians call it the death camp. My great-grandmother was at this site, and luckily later when the people started complaining, she was transferred to Swakopmund.
But most of the Herero and Nama who were held here didn't survive.
A lot of people perished. Death and starvation was what killed a lot of people over here, and when they died, their body were thrown in the sea.
And those who weren't worked to death were subjected to other horrors.
And this is where they did their medical experiment on the Nama and Herero people. Medical experiment. Based on my grandmother, they were fascinated with some of the Herero people. They have like their gums are like darker than others. So they will scrape that and scrape that until it bleeds to find out what is the cause of that. I don't know what was the whole point, but the bottom line is this was their biggest fear was to go to that medical center. Because they knew that once you go there, you are not going to be alive.
In that medical center, prisoners were subjected to many forms of systematic atrocities, like being injected with diseases like smallpox, typhus, and tuberculosis, or poisons like arsenic.
They were also used as human material for eugenic research.
In order to conduct this pseudo-scientific research, German doctors sent the skulls of deceased prisoners back to Germany.
Thousands of human remains, skulls, skeletons, and so on, were transported back to the German Empire. Those human remains are in German basements of museums, of hospitals. And only in 2011, I think, for the first time, a few of them were returned to Namibia.
The man overseeing these inhumane practices was Dr. Eugene Fischer. He and other colonial officials
later became prominent leading figures in the race ideology of Nazi Germany.
These are our shoes.
But there is no official recognition at Shark Island of the crimes which were perpetrated here.
There is no mention about the Hereros at all. It's now a camping site, so I'm sure a lot of Germans, they come here and camp, and Namibians, they come and camp as if this is just a normal place.
So where to now for the Herero and their struggles for justice and reparations?
What do you say to German Namibians who say there wasn't a genocide here? That's not fair.
What do I say to them? Nothing. We are going to get our land back. And how we're going to take it, I don't know. But I'm certain, just the way I was certain that one day Germany will be willing to apologize properly, just the way I was certain that Germany one day will pay reparation, even though they're saying we are going to give you like a gesture or development, and it's just, things will happen. The Herero people are resilient people. From what we have gone through, what my people have gone through, from genocide, dispossession, concentration camp, and for my father and my grandparents to reconstitute themselves and send me to school. And they walk straight. They didn't walk with their head down. And so that's the way I'm going to walk. I will walk straight with my head up.